Greetings and welcome to this all new episode of Let's Create Something with Trapcode TAO. Hey, it's been a while. A couple weeks ago since last episode, but here I am back again. It's not that I'm out of ideas, it's just that sometimes I'm not really sure about what you guys want to learn. So last time what I did is just went on the social networks and asked what were you all interested in learning, and one of my good friends, Iain Goodyear, he already asked before about his want to know how to create this, and especially these little gaps in these rings and how to animate this. And Mr. Goodyear is someone that I follow. I've been following for quite a while now, and if you don't follow him, I would suggest that you do so, because he also has compilations. He posts one Trapcode TAO project per day, and everything he does is quite experimentative and very interesting to look at for inspiration. So if you're looking for some inspiration stuff to create with Trapcode TAO, here he has on his Vimeo, he has 3 nice videos with each one 30 different animation synced to music. It's very nice. It's very something that I like to watch every now and then. So let's start and let's go ahead and create that. It's been a while. I did this. I was probably trying to do something else, and I ended up with that during month of June last summer. So let's start ahead by creating a new solid. I'm gonna call this one TAO. I'm gonna make it 1080 by 1080 for a square composition, and we're gonna apply our TAO effect right on it. We could use the path generator in this case. I think that this is something that we could work out doing, but I think that in my example I used a mask, and we don't often use masks, so let's go ahead and let's select our ellipse tool here, and while we have the TAO layer selected, make sure that we have it selected or else it's not going to work. Let's simply double click on there, and we're going to have approximately the same circle shape. So let's turn off the path generator, and here we can select our mask here, and I'm going to double click in here, and while we hold Control Alt Shift, and I grab the corner here, and we can scale it down from its center point. So we're gonna have something quite similar to what we have by default with the path generator. But the nice thing about mask is that we can play around with the handles here, and we can animate the path if that's something that we want to do, which is something that we can't do with the path generator. But we have a little bit less control than if we were using light objects to create our TAO geometry, because when we use light objects, we can, in addition to that, type down some specific commands in the light that are sometimes pretty useful, and we can also like keyframe more properties than just the path. But enough talking about that. Let's just use the mask for this example, and first of all, let's add some segments so we can get this kind of smooth. I'm just gonna hide the mask here, and maybe hit Control Shift H to hide the layer controls. So let's make it 4 sides, and let's remove the chamfer, maybe decrease the thickness of our circle, and let's create our gap. So very simple how I did it in this case. Just go in the offset animation sequence, activate that, and let's look at it this way. So we can create a keyframe on the OAS size right on the first frame here at frame 0, and remember, drawing geometry by default in TAO is 10 seconds. So this is kind of the number that I work with most of the time. So let's go to frame 300 at 10 seconds, and let's create another keyframe. So let's get back in the middle here and right around frame 150, and let's create another one. And now we're gonna hit page down, so we just move one frame further than that, and we're gonna just create another one and set that to 0. So that's gonna decrease that, and to make sure that we don't have any interpolation in between, we're gonna right click on the one just before, and we're gonna set it to toggle hold keyframe. Alright, so now we just want to keep it at 0 for a couple of frames. That's gonna make our gap, so I'm gonna go just a little bit further in time and create another keyframe and set it back to 0, and I'm gonna hit page down to go right on the next frame, and now this one I'm just gonna set it to the default 100, so I can just grab the last one, hit Control C to copy it, and paste it right here. Once again, we're gonna have some little interpolation here. If you want to get rid of that, we must set this one to toggle hold keyframe. It's gonna make it disappear, the little pointy thing here, but we still have like some angle here, like it's not completely straight, but that's something that we can tune with how many segments that we add in there. The more segments, the more room it's gonna have to make it flat on here. And now if we look at the disposition of our keyframes here in the timeline, it's pretty easy to figure out that this will control the width of our gap. So let's have it like that, and there we go. So now let's have this rotate around, and we're gonna rotate this 360 degree. So how are we gonna make that rotate? This is one good thing about the masks that we cannot do with the light. So here's one good side of using the mask. We have this here, which will allow us to rotate our entire object, and which is not linked to the offset, properties. We're gonna leave this at 0. We're not gonna animate the offset of our gap moving around, or not that this is something that we couldn't do, but let's simply rotate this 360 degree. So this is gonna allow us to have it rotate like this. And do we need that to be 300 keyframes? Not necessarily sure of that. We can make it a shorter animation. So let's bring this here, and let's go to frame 89, close the work area. So here we have a basic 360 degree revolution with, it's gonna make our gap rotate around like such. And let's repeat that with the repeater. So let's get on Google, and here I'm gonna look for Dan Ebbert's wiggle, and one more time I'm gonna use that. So let's copy our line of code, and let's open up the repeater section. So let's open up the first repeater, and right here let's repeat it something like, let's uncheck the symmetric doubler, and let's repeat it 6 times. But by default it's repeating it on the, while offsetting it 100 pixel on X, but we just want to keep that at 0. We want to offset it on the Z instead. So as we pull this in the negative values, it's going to make copies of our circle towards us, which is totally fine with me. I'm gonna create a camera, so Control Alt Shift C, and I'm gonna make it 50 millimeters, the default value for an After Effects camera. And I'm gonna create a Control-Alt-Shift-Y, a new null. I'm gonna turn it 3D, attach the camera to that, just so we have a little dolly centered to our composition. And I'm gonna hit C to scroll between the camera tools, and this is the panning tool. I'm just gonna move it a little bit backwards. So that's what we get. And let's create some offset with our if we look at the world rotate here, so this is gonna offset our gaps here in the repeater, the R1 world Z rotate. So let's add Dan Ebbert's wiggle to that. So I'm gonna alt click on the stopwatch here, so world rotate Z, and I'm gonna paste what I had in my clipboard. So by default it's set to loop at 3 seconds, and we have 90 frames of animation, so that's something that we don't need to change by default. So here is what we'll get. So that's gonna make it loop, and of course you can control that manually depending on what you aim to do with this animation. And the thing is that with that, like, each copy is gonna go faster than the previous one, so it's just like something to explore here if you wanna get different results on this randomization. Let's add this code here, seed random, and we're just gonna put a random number here and any number to test how it's gonna, like, each number we put there is gonna give us a different results in terms of motion. And also we have the frequency here. If for some reason you think this is too fast, let's half it down, and we'll get some different types of animation. Also it's gonna loop because we have the loop time set to 3 seconds. Same thing for the amplitude. Maybe we don't want that much difference between our gaps, so now they'll stay pretty close to each other. Or if you want to get a little bit more manual control in there, let's add ourselves a new null, Control-Alt-Shift-Y, and on this one we'll add an expression control slider, and let's call this frec, and let's call this amp, and let's put the same numbers that we have in here. So 0.5 for the frequency, 11 for the amplitude, and let's connect this to that. So I'm selecting the value here using the pick whip. I'm gonna connect it to that, and if for some reason this panel disappears, we can lock it down with clicking right here, and here the amplitude, I'm gonna connect it to that. So perhaps we want the amplitude to start really small, so I'm gonna add a keyframe for that, and let's get to the end, and I'm gonna add another keyframe here, and right in the middle let's increase the amplitude. Now depending on how the cache works with your After Effects version, it might not update in the viewport immediately, so in this case we'd have to hit Control-Alt// to force refresh, and then we'll get something like that, which is perhaps something interesting, perhaps not. Let's increase it even more. So different results here. Let's ease down, ease those keyframes, just to look at how. So yeah, so now that we've set that up, and I think I'll just remove the amplitude here. Just gonna keep it a little bit more basic, and why not? Let's duplicate this thing, and let's call this seed random. So now we have something to connect that, and this will allow us to get different results right from our custom panel here. So that's interesting. All right. Next, let's make this a little bit richer in terms of lighting. So I don't remember exactly what I did, but let's create a white background. Let's put that behind. Right now it's pretty flat. It's got the default light. When you don't have any lights with TAO, it has an ambient light and it has one normal light, but as soon as we create a new one, it's gonna override that. So let's create a new ambient light, and I'm gonna make it totally white right there. So now we get only the ambient occlusion, no real detail, and we're gonna call that amp. And let's create other lights, and these are gonna be point lights, and we're gonna call them TAO Lumi. These are special lights that create a little bit more details in the lighting. So let's center it down, 540, 540, and 0. So that's right at the middle here. And oh yeah, if we want to register that we use TAO Lumi light, we have to activate it right here from the options in the material and lighting. So as we look at that, this is without the Lumi light activated. This is with the Lumi light. So we have nice bright light coming in the center here, and it goes on infinitely. It has like it has a range up to some point, but one thing that we can do to narrow it down here is to set the light fall off to smooth, and let's decrease that so we get almost no ambient light. So our thing will turn out to be pretty dark, and let's also reduce that so we have more manual control on what we do. And I'm gonna create several of those. So one is gonna be kind of at near the bottom of, like if we were looking down into a well, the first light we want to put it pretty far down at the bottom of the well. And let's duplicate this, and we can also increase its radius a little bit, so we have this little soft ring of light only affecting the deepest part of our thing here. And let's duplicate that, so Control D, we have another Lumi light. We can bring this one up, and we can decrease its size depending on exactly how we want the light to affect our thing here. And let's create another one. So I'm once again Control D, duplicating this one, and this one let's not have it at the center. So let's pull it up here, and I'm gonna hit Control Shift H to reveal it, and like let's bring it somewhere around like get some a little bit of specular here on the side maybe. That's what you're aiming for. And let's select all those three now. We can maybe reduce that or increase that altogether, depending on, once again, what we're aiming for here. And I think that the shininess, I've set it down pretty low. And here. And you can play around with the diffuse, softness, and other settings here to make it look exactly like you want. I'm gonna add the project files in the description below, so if you want to look at it as a reference. Most of the time I don't really know what I'm doing when I'm placing those lights, just trying to make it look nice, but you can do whatever you want as long as you like what you're seeing. So that's what we kind of get. Let's get back to the material and lighting. I think we can have it have a larger radius here. And once again, like I'll add this one as well as the old one I made in the description below. I'll add a link to that because I'm not really exactly sure what values I've put down. So let's see here. I'm gonna simply add a ramp on the background layer. Let's make it a radial, and let's get back here, and we're simply gonna make this one pure white, and here we can have the second color value some kind of gray here, so it's gonna make in sort that we have kind of simulating lighting. And if you can notice some banding going on around here, maybe just set all that to 16 bits per channel, or increase the ramp scatter. And let's see here. So first, let's look at our light individually. I'm gonna shut off this one, I'm gonna shut off this one, and I'm gonna also shut off this one. So by default, with just the ambient light, we have this kind of lighting here. I'm gonna increase that to make it kind of until it gets like mid-gray. Everything gets kind of mid-gray, and we can see here our shadows. That's the ambient occlusion. So right in the rendering section here, if we set it to off, we'll notice that all our shadow details here, which are pretty nice, are generated by the ambient occlusion. So if you want some control on that, I make it more obvious, or everything you wish for, this is where you're gonna get to do that. But I think the default values work pretty fine for this. Let's look at our light so individually. First, this one is like the bottom light, so let's increase that, and we can see that the light is kind of decreasing as it gets higher in our tube. So this is the bottom light, the light that's at the bottom of our list. The second one is the light, now it's shut off, so let's increase that, and I think we want this one to be less intense, and perhaps also the first one. Let's decrease its radius, let's have it somewhere around that, and the second one, if we look at its position, like where are you? So at 0, it's right in the middle. We want to bring it higher. It's like this one is the light that we're using to light it up from the top. It's our overhead light. So we want it to come flat on the last ring here on top. Right, and the third one is our spec light. Like this is the one. It's also gonna be on top, but it's gonna be like, let's set it to be closer to our objects. And here I'm hitting V here, making sure that select my light object, and we can bring this like somewhere around here to get some details. So in order to get something like that, and then to increase the contrast on top of all of that, let's add an adjustment layer. So Control Alt Y, adjustment layer. Let's add a levels. So let's grab this from here, and right here we have some room to darken everything. So you can see our little graph here, it stops right there, so we don't really need all this way around. So let's grab this over there, and let's now make it less dark, maybe get a little bit more details. And from this point it's all about the little tweaks here and there that you want to do. On top of that, it's always good to add some curves, so let's do that so we can furthermore increase the contrasts here, so we have more details on the gradients. And let's get our overhead light, hit double A to maybe increase its intensity, I don't know, depending on what you're trying to get here. And we're getting some noise on the back here. Let's solo this. So right here, this is the scattering of the ramp. Let's bring this back down to 0 if you don't want to have any noise here, but sometimes that's just to help for subsequent compression we might get. Right. Or we can simply alt click here, get it up to 32 bits per channel. I don't know if that's gonna help us make it less noisy here. I don't think that it's quite the case. Let's get back in here on the ramp. We can pull this off like to make it a little bit like less obvious for this line here, and I think that we're pretty much done here. It doesn't look exactly as a previous one that I've had. Unfortunately, this is what happens most of the time. You create something once and then you try to recreate it, but it's gonna always have a certain amount of differences in there, and doesn't offset pretty much. Let's go back to our settings here and let's increase the frequency. Let's set to 2 and let's see what kind of motion we shall get. It's more active there. Let's set it to 0.76 and let's instead increase the amplitude. So pretty interesting. Now we can try out different results, and now we're only exporting 90 frames, but if we would ever want this to last longer, so let's say we want to double the time, so let's go to frame 180, and we don't need to worry about those keyframes. Those keyframes will always sync up to 300. They are the one who creates, like, who interacts with the geometry, but this one is the animation. So let's bring this 180. But now that also means that the loop time here, this is 6 seconds now. It's gonna work if we leave it at 3, but the thing is that it's gonna go and do the exact same thing twice. So if you want more variations here, let's adjust that loop time per meter here, and let's set it to 6. So now we're ready to look at that. And judge if you like it or not. You can always come back in the repeater options and adjust the distance between each layer by increasing or decreasing. Where was I? Not in the material lighting, in the first repeater. Why is it closed down? Alright, so we can change that. We can animate that over time. Maybe have it start at minus 153 here, and make sure that the last frame is that. We're gonna copy this and we're gonna paste it right at the beginning, and let's go somewhere in the middle and increase that. So we're gonna have different motion in there, and that doesn't stop here. I'm not gonna try everything that's possible here because the possibilities are almost infinite, but this is where you can start play around and explore the numerous possibilities and export nice animated GIF loop or anything that you want to post. I'd be curious to look at it. Alright, so that's about all I have to show you for today. So as always, thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.